Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast, where we talk all things money and business. My name's Allen, and I am here with the rock star of the show, Roth the Pod Zabriskie. Rod, what's up, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm really good. Really good. Thanks for asking. This feels like a new trend.
Yeah, I feel like I left you, I was unkind to you for like a year and a half, and then I realized maybe you wanted to have a little reciprocation.
Okay, well, I'm gonna
nice
have to
enough
come
to ask me.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm gonna have to come back ready with some interesting facts to match your interesting facts.
All right. Okay.
All right,
well,
we'll
my
see.
interesting thing for today is it's a weird time of year because the sun's shining now. Like we kept talking all the time about snow forever. It's shining, but it's not warm out there.
No, it is not. It is quite cold, at least here in I was going to say Salt Lake, but you're a little bit further south. Yeah, it's freezing cold. It's like 20, 25 degrees out there, but it looks nice.
It does.
It looks nice. Okay,
Yeah.
Rod, I have this feeling. I know I say it every time we bring up the weather, but I'm not sure that that's the reason that people tune in, but maybe.
I hope not.
Maybe.
I hope not.
Okay, but can I just kind of throw something out there that maybe listeners have noticed? Maybe not, but maybe, because it's been a little bit gradual, but we've had a little bit of a shift in our show. Do you know what I'm referencing?
I'm interested to hear.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'll just tell you, we've shifted from having nearly as many guests on the show.
Yes.
Okay. So call me crazy, Rod, and this might be like a little egotistical to hope for, but I'm hoping that people will tune in to listen to the interesting, thoughtful, educational things that we have to provide. Is that crazy?
Well, I hope it's not egotistical because that's what we strive for. So
okay, well, regardless of whether we hit it or not, that's at least what we're going for.
Absolutely.
We're on the same page.
Yep.
Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't bring in interesting, relevant guests that we feel like bring real value. But here's what I thought. Here's the story, Rod. I'm going to open the curtains a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to another podcast, and the host threw out a line that was interesting. He said something to the effect of, we don't need another guest podcast that's doing it worse than the other ones. And I mean, basically he was saying like, okay, you could do the exact same thing. There's tons of guest podcasts and there's nothing wrong with those, right?
Yeah.
There's real value there. But like, I noticed that a lot of the guests just kind of go the rounds. And I thought, you know what, if they can get that same guest 5 other places and they're basically saying the same thing, like, am I really providing that much value? My answer to that was no.
Yeah.
So when we feel like there's opportunities to get good people who really bring value to the show, I think those are the situations that we're going to bring people on. So it'll be really interesting people and or really interesting topics or relevant topics.
Right.
Like we recently had, I think it was Lynette. I can't remember who the last person was, but Lynette Zhang maybe, and we were talking about gold. Well, that's an interesting and relevant topic right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. And I was totally in agreement. I thought everything you said made sense because, like you said, there's kind of this circuit out there of interviewees hitting, all kinds of different podcasts. And again, we want interesting people on our podcast if it's not someone that people are just seeing everywhere else as well. So
yeah. And especially if they go on a podcast that's like, it's a podcast that's been in existence for a long time. They're really seasoned. They're really good. Like there's a chance that they just may be a better interviewer. Yeah. Anyway, now that doesn't mean we won't have people, but that's been basically the logic behind our shift in shows. So we'll still have people on. It'll just be less frequently. Okay, Rod. So for today's episode, which I've been trying to kind of mold for a few weeks now, but the way it's come together is basically in the form of interesting headline article or article headlines.
Yeah.
Oh, but wait, before I do that, Rod, we have an event that I have to make sure I announce before I forget. Our big event coming up May 4th is the Alternative Wealth Building Virtual Summit for High Income Earners. Again, that's May 4th. Tickets will be going on sale shortly. So
I'm excited.
I'm excited about it too. We actually just added one more person to our guest lineup. So we'll announce that maybe next week after we've ironed out our details. But yeah, we've got 6, I think, speakers lined up so far, and we could have as many as 8, but we have at least our core 6 so far. So very excited, really good people who have impactful, powerful wealth building messages to share. Okay, Rod, now that we've gotten announcements out of the way, let's talk about our topic for today, which I started to introduce: interesting news article headlines. Okay. What does that mean? The way that I pictured this, Rod, and I was just describing this before, but I didn't really give you enough heads up on this. So the way I'm picturing this happening potentially down the road is like both of us come to the table with a handful of interesting, relevant topics, headlines that we're seeing in the news today, and bring them out and get the reaction of the other person. The good news is I have plenty of them picked out for today. So we're going to get a lot of Rod the Pod's reactions.
And I can tell people I have not seen these headlines ahead of time. So it is going to be on the spot reaction.
Yeah, on the spot reaction. Then see, there's just something about that. I like putting people on the spot, Rod. I like getting put on the spot.
Okay.
As long as it goes well.
Yeah, that's
the good news is, Rod, if you completely blow the answers, we can always edit it and do it again.
Deal. Okay,
So
we won't tell everybody that we did that.
We won't tell everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Rod. So relevant headlines. Should we just jump into the first one that I have?
Let's do it.
Okay. The first relevant headline coming from CNBC is taking longer than I would have liked to open. And it is, oh gosh, Rod, I didn't realize I put this one first. I'm kind of excited now. You're going to be surprised. Okay. Here it goes. Most couples are financially incompatible, survey finds. Having a money talk could help, no matter how long you've been together. And this, Rod, in my mind, is a good question for a seasoned married veteran who just celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary. So, Rod, what are your reaction to most couples being financially incompatible? One, and then, the suggestion that having a money talk could help, even if you've been doing it for a long time, being married.
Okay. I would agree. Okay. So from where I sit, I get to see a lot of couples in the way that they work, right? Now, we don't always meet with both husband and wife, both spouses. However, we get a little bit of a glimpse. And what I can say is, so my first reaction is that often, not always, but very often, the reason why we're only meeting with one spouse is because he or she is the one who is taking the lead. And it's not that the other one is disinterested completely in financial issues, but they're not wanting to be involved in like the day-to-day decision making as it relates to really getting into the weeds, taxes and budgeting and investing and all of like the detail stuff. So I guess I would say that seems to match my experience with people and even myself. So my wife and I grew up even though we both grew up in Utah, we both grew up in, church related households, like very religious type of thing. And there are core differences in the way that her family ran and the way my family ran. And we're bringing those two worlds together. And one thing that we laugh about regularly is that when you bring those two worlds together, you have no idea the kinds of conversations you're going to have, or just the assumptions that you make coming in, or I'll say I made coming in, assumptions she made coming in. And when they clash, it's like, oh, whoa, I didn't realize there was even a different way to think about this. Here's the example we always use, and it's not related directly to finance, but I think it's kind of funny. So we start having kids. Christmas morning or Christmas Eve comes, and the decision, and we're getting ready to, get all the presents going. Well, it turns out in her house, when they ordered the presents from Santa, they were not wrapped. Whereas in my house, when we ordered the presents from Santa, they were wrapped and under the tree in wrapping paper. And this was like, it blew my mind that was even a possibility, that you just put things under the tree that aren't wrapped. But the same thing for her. She's like, but that's just the way it always was. That's just,
you don't wrap the things from Santa.
Heavens no.
Okay, Rod. So can I just weigh in on this for a second?
Yeah.
Here's the deal. I'm on your side. I've always seen wrapped presents. In fact, this might seem a little bit strange now, but my parents didn't give us presents on Christmas. It was everything was basically from Santa, which I'm not saying right or wrong or philosophical. I'm not getting into that, but that, and everything was basically wrapped, which, oh my heavens, is a lot of work, especially when you have 7 kids, right?
Yes.
So
I can attest.
Anyway, yes, you can attest that. So I'm kind of with you, but I have now gotten married for the second time.
Mm-hmm.
And both my first wife and Heather are on the same side as your wife, Jody.
Oh,
in that
interesting.
They don't wrap the presents from Santa Claus.
See?
So anyway, this is a difficult one. Okay, I know that wasn't like the focus, but just as an example,
illustration.
it's interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, Rod. So finally then, and maybe you hit on this, but let's say you've been married for 25 years and you're still maybe not quite on the same page. What do you tell that person to do?
Yeah. Okay. So the second part of the headline, I think, is absolutely correct and great advice to get help, right? Because I thought wrapping presents was the quote unquote right way to do it. She thought not wrapping them was the quote unquote right way to do it. And obviously neither of them is like, there's an immoral issue here. And that a lot of that sometimes comes up with finances and just the way you manage them and whatever. Obviously it's a lot more important issues as you relate to the finances as it compared, depending on who you're talking to. There may be those who feel like the Christmas question is more important, but I guess the point is, and I would say this, whether it's finances or really anything else, just relationship as a whole, some of the best things that Jody and I did were to seek out like ways that we could have a better relationship. And finances are obviously a huge part of necessity of the relationship for a couple. And so having like whether it's reading books, listening to podcasts, finding financial counselors or whatever, I would say that whether you've been married for a month or 50 years, that could only help.
Okay, I think that's good advice from a seasoned veteran. Thanks, Rod.
Thanks.
Okay, that's our first headline. And I don't think I have anything more to add. Like at the end of the day, I think it makes sense for people to try to get as on the same page as they can. And I do think it's pretty obvious that money is one of the major challenges that people have to work through, especially if you get married when you're a little bit later in life, when you both have been doing things on your own for a period of time. And now you're trying to kind of coexist and merge things. It can be a little bit tricky. Yeah. So, but I do think getting on the same page is an important piece. So, but I just thought that was interesting. It just stood out to me as an interesting thought. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Rod,
good
this
pick.
one came from CNBC as well. I think the last one was a CNBC.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting because this is like a never ending debate. This is on February 15th at 8:37 Eastern time. 8:37 a.m. Eastern time. Here's what it said. Pre-tax versus Roth 401k. Deciding which to use for retirement is trickier than you think. Now I want your reaction to that.
Yeah, well, my first thought on it is that I've mentioned before that I use both. I have both. And the part where I felt like the system failed me is when I was at my first job. I was making next to nothing. I was just barely graduated from college. And the HR director, she was doing her job, and she sat down with me and said, you need to think about your future. May feel like a long way away, but you're going to want to retire someday. You need to start preparing for that. And here's the paperwork, sign on the dotted line so that we can get you started up on a 401k. Now, at the time, they didn't offer a Roth. If it had been an option and I could have chosen one or the other, then, maybe I would have been smart enough
You're
to choose
aging
Roth.
yourself,
Hard
Rod.
to say. Well, it was before that I had my Roth IRA.
No, I know. I'm just kidding. This was Roth 401k.
Yeah, at that level. So anyway, at the end of the day, it was just the very wrong decision for the, what was I, 24-year-old me to be setting aside pre-tax dollars and pay tax later, because I was at the lowest tax bracket. When I was getting tax refunds. We had 3 kids at the time, and etc. Right, for other reasons, low income being one of them. I was getting all kinds of tax refunds. There was no reason to pre-tax any of that.
Okay, then, Rod, help illuminate the audience on what they should be thinking about when considering whether they're going one or the other.
Yeah. Okay. So that's my example. I would say if you have the opportunity to do a Roth 401k and you're okay with the investment options that they offer, then at whatever age you are, at whatever income level you are, that may be something to consider, right? We often talk about how these life insurance strategies that we offer from a tax standpoint act an awful lot like a Roth. And we say that a lot of times because most people are familiar with that, but secondly, because a lot of people see that as more favorable to pay the tax today. And then you have, that money out there that you never have to pay on it again. Any growth that you see, anything else, you just never pay the tax on it again. So, and I'll include with that, in the many, many years that we've been doing this, and we've asked many people, do you think taxes are going up in the future or staying the same or going down? And most people just laugh at the question because it just seems so obvious that the pickle that the government is in right now as it relates to all these obligations that they've made for themselves in the future, and squandered the build, what was supposed to be building up to take care of those things, specifically Social Security and Medicare. And then my favorite one is when Obama wanted to expand the healthcare program, and he said, there's a lot of waste going on in Medicare. What we're going to do is we're going to clean up that waste, take the savings that we get there, and use that to pay for this new program. And that's I wonder how that's gone. But anyway, the long story short, I think most people agree that taxes are more likely to go up in the future than otherwise. So to me, I think if you're looking at it at all, even if it's an option at all, then the Roth just makes more sense.
Okay, so it sounds to me like it's not as tricky as they're suggesting. Because that was my reaction to that. It says the headline was like Roth versus traditional. It might be trickier than you think, and I just don't think it's that tricky. If I'm being totally honest with you, like where you're likely to save money, most people, it makes sense to go Roth. There might be a handful of options, a handful of situations when you could make sense of going traditional still at this stage.
Do you think when they said tricky, they meant you might get tricked into doing what isn't the right answer?
That's interesting. Okay, so that might be, from that standpoint, it might be trickier. But in terms of like how to actually figure out what to do, like it's actually pretty easy.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Okay, Rod, we're changing topics altogether again.
Okay. All right.
So far we've talked about, we've gotten some relationship advice from Rod, the pod. We've also gone into a little bit of tax advice. Okay, nope, that is not tax advice.
Not advice, yeah.
Not advice. This is just based on our experience. Okay, here we go, Rod. This third line I've got. Wells Fargo delivers warning ahead of key inflation report. You ready for their warning?
I'm ready.
Fed is not your friend.
Ooh.
The Fed is not
Huh.
your friend. Okay, I have another article headline, and it basically says that inflation's likely to go higher, more or less.
Okay.
Basically, it's a warning that, like, this whole, like, what they're doing is probably it's not really working that well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Rod, I'm asking you to play economist and talk to me a little bit about what you feel when you hear that sentence. Fed is not your friend. What comes to your mind? Because you
Okay.
haven't read the article. So
I
this is
didn't
just
read the
you.
article. It's fascinating to me that it's coming from Wells Fargo, because you would say that Wells Fargo and any of those financial institutions are in cahoots with the Fed.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So the first thing it tells me, which I already knew from being around for the last 8 months, that what the Fed is doing is not exactly popular or what all parties think they should be doing.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So
So
that's
that's
an
my
interesting
first
point.
response, was just with Wells Fargo. But my second thing is that I feel like the government and really the previous actions of the Fed really has put them in a bind, because the spending that the government's doing, has done, printing of money, puts them in a pickle, and they're like trying to unwrap this. So they feel like they have to push interest rates higher, but in doing that, the question is, can it go high enough to unwind what the government has done with the printing of side of things? So money manipulation is kind of like, meeting its fate, so to speak, because of what has been done before. And one thing that I think has exacerbated this is when you go back and you look at what happened in 2008 and the bailout. I think it was like 800 billion or something that they printed to bail out.
It was a big number.
It was a big number. And there were all kinds of warnings and red lights going off from especially, really conservative libertarian types of people, saying that's going to drive inflation crazy. Well, did it? No, it didn't. The 2008, all that printing of money did not. So it gave everybody really this false sense of, oh, well, maybe that means we can just keep printing and print whatever we want and create all kinds of debt, and it won't matter. Like, it's not ever going to come around. Well, to me, the difference between 2008 and 2020 is, number one, the number was a lot bigger. I don't know what they ended up at, 4.5 trillion, something like that was basically printed. But the difference is they were sending checks to the households across the country. In 2008, they were bailing out, or basically eliminating debt off the books of companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that money, it helped to kind of shore up the economy, but it wasn't putting additional money into circulation directly. Whereas in 2020, all of the stimulus stuff was going directly to people's in their hands, and they were going out and spending it. And that, I think, had there was no other result that could have happened other than creating inflation.
That's interesting. This reminds me, Rod, of the economist that our friend Buck has on his show, and I can't think of his name.
Richard Duncan.
Okay. So Richard Duncan, didn't he suggest the philosophy that we should, like, his thought process or philosophy was basically, we've spent so much already that we should just like shoot the moon and go for it, and spend and spend and spend our way out of it, basically, by spending through like innovation. It wasn't just like spending to spend, but it was spending to create innovation and those kinds of things. And it was an interesting philosophy, but I just like, that's what it kind of reminds me of Hearts, Rod. I'm not like an expert in card games, but isn't it Hearts where like you can, you're trying not to get hearts, but the other option is to get all the hearts. And
I've never played it.
Okay,
that sounds fascinating.
So that's basically it. What you do, you try, at least the way I understand it, you can shoot the moon. I think that's what they call it. Maybe not, but either way, the idea is you go for all the hearts, But if you don't get all the hearts, then including the queen, like if you don't get that, then you accumulate a whole bunch of points that you don't want.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
That's kind of what Richard Duncan's philosophy kind of reminds me of. But
Yeah.
can I just tell you, I thought it was intriguing. Anyway, what's your take?
Yeah, well, and that's probably one of the things that made me really think long and hard about, well, what was the difference before? Because we came across him before COVID, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then with what then happened over the last 3 years, why didn't it go the direction that he thought it should? And that was my conclusion, was it was spending. There were, like, creating circulation drives inflation. And not only that, but the whole everything that happened in the labor market, pushing wages higher, that was going to cause inflation. And so one of the reasons why Wells Fargo and others are so like up in arms or like questioning whether the Fed can even fix this problem is that while they're driving up interest rates and it's quote unquote hurting people, right, as a result of the higher rates, it's not fixing the problem because the labor market is still just super hot and unemployment keeps going lower. And something I saw the other day says it's lower than it is today. It's the last time it was as low as it is today was like 1968 or something. Long
pretty
time
wild.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
So, and adding, 500,000 jobs well, I saw last July they added 500,000 jobs. In January, 500,000. I didn't see all the months between there, but just the labor market's going nuts. And what they're trying to do and cooling off the economy. I mean, inflation is lower today than it was last July when they started raising rates. Got as high as 8-9%, and now it's more 6 or something. But they want to push it to 2, right? That's their aim. And man, seems like it's a tough nut to crack.
Okay, well, the other article, like I said, suggested that it's maybe going higher before it goes lower. There's a lot of optimists who would believe that that they'll be able to cool things off and then start to reduce. But basically, this article was suggesting that they don't think that's the case.
Well, and what's funny is when they started doing it, there was a concern about them overdoing it. They're just going to drive us to a recession, which may still happen, right? That I'm not saying that's off the table, but whatever the concern was at the time hasn't played out the way people were worried about.
Okay, Rod, some wisdom coming from Rod the Pod again. Okay, we have 2 more. One's going to be from me, and then I did ask you to bring one to the table, right? Yep. So you'll let you do the last one. Okay, so this headline is what started the whole thought process for me. Okay. Because I thought it was so interesting and I thought it was worth talking about. So here's what it is. The Fair Tax Act aims to abolish the IRS and set a national sales tax. Here's how it would work. Now, I'm not going to read how it would work, Rod. I'll just give you the nuts and bolts, which is basically that everybody would pay 30% sales tax and it would abolish the IRS. Now, there's other stuff going on there, but that's basically what the plan is. And it's very much opposed by Democrats. There's at least a subsection of the GOP that would love to see that happen. So, Rod, what do you think?
I mean,
it's got big repercussions. They're wide ranging.
Yeah, the biggest one is the whole kind of social reform that's been happening is to protect the poor, right? From a tax standpoint. And that's one of the largest drivers for where we are today with the tax code, is to have it be more favorable towards the lower income people and more burdensome for higher income people. Right? That's kind of the way.
Okay, well, I don't think it would accomplish that objective. Right.
Well, yeah, this would reverse that.
Yes, absolutely.
It basically puts back on the lower income people, because they're
the same as it would for everybody else.
Yeah,
Basically.
what they do is any spending they do, they're going to get taxed on that. And I would say, higher income people can be more careful, so to speak, in the spending. So in other words, just because you're $1 million earner doesn't mean you spend all of that
Right.
million.
You
And so
might
a
you might save a
$300,000 tax
huge
bill.
you might save a huge portion of that. If you live
Yeah.
on 250,000 and save then you don't pay taxes on that
Yep.
until, I mean, obviously there would be a formula for that but yeah, so as a high income earner, it sounds incredibly nice, Rod. We could really have some control over. So, and that's kind of what when I read through the article, it came to the conclusion that overall, the bottom 2/3, as an average, they would be ahead of the game from where it is today. Now, they also articulated in there that the very bottom would go up and the very top would go down. So
Gotcha.
it is kind of this interesting balance between. So Rod, what if they come up with what if we come up with a 30% sales tax like this, but somehow somehow it does become more favorable to people with lower incomes, so that it's not having the same impact. Because can I just tell you, the simplicity of a 30% sales tax is awfully intriguing to me.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
thinking about what a pain it is to do, ridiculous amount of tax work that has to be done for our business.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So my thought on that is, my guess is that a lot of the social programs that help the lower income people wouldn't just evaporate. So, and I'm thinking specifically about Medicaid and WIC,
Welfare and
yeah, a lot of these different things that help people, and to the extent that you're getting stuff like food products through WIC, for example, you're obviously not paying for those, so you wouldn't be paying a tax on
the
it.
sales tax. Yeah, that's
So
true.
the very lowest income people, again, who knows what all would develop, but my guess is those things would still be in place, and so that they would, but it would be as much of a disincentive to get out of that as it is today, and get to a place where all of a sudden you're paying tax. Again, right now it's the income tax that you start to earn more income. Now you start to pay instead of being a net receiver. But the same thing would happen on the sales tax side, right? In order to become to a place where you're buying your own food or more of it, then the tax burden is there. You're starting to take that on.
Okay, well, here's the good news, Rod. And we know that the various parties never overpromise and underdeliver. So I think I think this is fair to just assume. We'll take this we'll just take this to the bank. In the article, from what I understand, it will boost the economy by 10% the first year. 10% GDP, from what I understand.
Wow.
So let's do it, right?
That seems like reason enough.
Okay. Well, I was going to make another comment about something political, but I figured maybe I'll back off that. It is kind of funny, though, just to think about how ridiculous so many of these. Now, this is not going to go into effect. Let's be very clear, right? Like, there's not enough support for that. But I thought it was an interesting topic, and especially, as a high income earning group of people, like, what is most advantageous? What would be potentially for you, but what does that mean for other people? Like, I just thought kind of the overall construct of what something like that would mean, right? We've seen other things where it's just like a 20% flat tax across the board or whatever. Like, and I think there is a lot to be desired in those things because of like the simplicity. And, you think about how much tax fraud goes on in our current system. Like, just by simplifying things, they could probably clean up a lot of that. But again, my main thought there was just, it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. And a lot of the people I talk to, they'll say stuff like, well, I'm willing to pay my fair share. It just feels like it becomes an unfair share by the way that it's constructed. And so you're almost forced to find those, let's call them incentives, to to do what the government wants you to do so that you can save on that tax.
Yep. So what we do is we take advantage of the tax code the most effective way we can, and legally lower our tax bill. Okay, Rod, those are the headlines I had. So I'm going to let you share what you brought.
Okay, that sounds good. And then I came at this a little bit differently because it wasn't a headline. It was more like I got caught into just looking into this topic as a whole. And so I found a bunch of different things that I thought would be useful. And it has to do with food shortages.
Oh my goodness. I just realized that I missed one of my headlines when you said that. That's okay. Maybe I'll save it for next time. Actually, I'll just tell you because it was about the price of eggs. So,
okay.
But
all right.
We won't go into that. So anyway, that you might be covering that anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's right in line because the price of eggs is one of the huge things that like just happened over the last little bit, and inflation would have done it anyway. But I guess what I found is that there are other things going on that have made, especially in a few specific categories, the cost of food going much higher. And part of it is shortages. And a lot of this isn't like new to this year. There are things that are carrying over from last year. But because the problem persists, the problem gets worse. So for example, the war in Ukraine and all of the grain that otherwise would be trading hands if that war wasn't going on and if people were productive and able to, do their thing. And so that leads to, bread being
grain does lead to bread. And that's
I'm going to say in shortage, but really it's there. It's just a lot more expensive to go out and buy the loaf of bread that you're used to buying. So that was one of them. Then the second one was chickens and therefore eggs. So there's this avian flu that hit the fowl production area particularly hard. And what happened is if you actually had that disease going on in your flock, in your production, then you just had to knock out, everything. Like, right. You had to just sanitize, which just means getting rid of the birds. Well, you didn't want to get to that place where that would happen. So what I thought was interesting is while price of eggs were going higher, third and fourth quarter last year, the price of chicken was really cheap. So, where it normally would have been around here, I don't know where it is everywhere else, but where normally would have been maybe $2 to $3 a pound, it was $1 a pound or sometimes even less. And so my wife, being the person she is, she's going nuts. She's like, we gotta buy a lot of chicken. So we're bottling chicken, we're freezing it, all kinds of stuff, because it was like, not only was it buying price, it was like below buying price. But the reverse is now going to happen, right? So now because they kind of knocked out all their population, what's going to happen this year? Well, they're going to have to now rebuild the chicken population. And admittedly, it does, each generation doesn't take very long. Like I found this the hard way. We used to have laying hens, and one time we actually accidentally got some meat hens. Like they weren't supposed to be in the group, but there they were. And we're like, man, why are these things so enormous? Like within the laying hens, it takes like 20 weeks for them to get to a place to where they're starting to lay. But these meat hens, it was within like 7 or 8 weeks, and they were just, 2 and 3 times as big as the laying hens. These meat hens were. And gratefully, we had a neighbor that came over. And they're like, okay, yeah, those are not the same. We got to do something about this. But anyway, so my point is that I don't think this means that it takes years and years to get back, but it's going to take time, and so we'll pay more, both in terms of eggs and in terms of chicken.
Okay. Can I just comment on a couple things, Rod?
Yeah.
Just a couple key points on the
Absolutely.
egg, in the egg conversation.
Yep.
Number one, egg prices rose to record highs in December. Okay, so a dozen large grade eggs had more than doubled in price during 2022 on average. Okay. So that's
Yep.
pretty wild, right?
Yep.
It reminds me of a show, Arrested Development, Rod. You've never seen Arrested Development, but they're like this wealthy family,
Okay.
and they so kind of detached from reality. And she's like, "It's a banana. How much could it cost? $10? $10 is a lot for a banana, Rod."
That would be,
Anyway,
yes, absolutely.
that's kind of like what happened with the eggs. They became ridiculous. Wholesale egg prices have fallen. This is the good news, by more than 50% since December. Okay, like you said, though, the reason for all this was main reason, historic outbreak of bird flu in the U.S., disrupted egg production. So the prices have gone down, Rod, but it's not a sure thing that it's going to stay. So I'm just saying, that's my advice.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, that's all I have on the eggs.
Okay, and then I just have one more that's kind of a little more global, not necessarily specific to any one product. But going back to the whole increase of interest rates puts pressure on farmers to, like, a lot of them use debt to plant their crop or buy livestock on the side of ranchers. And with higher prices, can they afford to get the debt, et cetera, or higher interest rates, excuse me, can they afford to go and get the same debt as they would? So the question going into this season is, are we going to have shortages in a lot of different areas just because of that? Because a lot of the farmers can't afford to plant do as much as they otherwise would, and were doing when interest rates were lower.
Okay, so that is interesting. So you're saying, like, whereas they might go get X amount of millions of dollars to create their crops, they're now able to get much less.
Yep.
Because, of course, there's more debt that has to be serviced. It's interesting. I hadn't really considered or thought about that angle. So it's a good one.
Yeah.
Good one. Okay, so Rod, what should people do? What's your solution?
Well, the easy answer on this is, if you can't get what you want, then you look for substitutions, right? So if chicken, if that's your favorite and that's what you're going for, well, beef actually fits in that one as well with the drought in Texas. So, then pork or fish or plant-based. There's a lot of innovation happening on that. You hear jokes about it, but the make plant-based stuff taste like real meat, right? So
it's come a long way. It has come. So for over a year, I went vegetarian. So I started eating chicken again, Rod, but I don't eat any other meats. I guess I would eat turkey too. So basically white meat. But I went full-blown vegetarian. Can I just tell you, you can get a lot of really good food that is not real meat that tastes very similar to it. So there's my pitch that going plant-based isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
From what I understand, it's good for your heart.
Yep.
Rod, where else can you go get firsthand recommendations from firsthand experience about how to raise chickens, and you get some like heart health advice from someone with zero credentials in the health industry? What other podcast can you go to get that?
I imagine there are many out there.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, Rod, this was fun.
Yeah.
Like I said, next time we're going to adjust it a little bit, and both of us are going to come with like 3 to 5 really intriguing, interesting, relevant articles. And then we'll just get like raw reactions from the other person.
I like it.
That sounds good.
It's been fun.
But this was good. I appreciated all your reactions. I was impressed. You had a lot of good ideas and thoughts, especially having not looked at or seen anything in relation to what the content that I was going to bring up was. So good job, Rod. You could deserve an applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, Rod, unless there's anything else, let's call it for today.
I'm good.
Okay, thanks everybody for hanging out with us today on the Money Insights podcast, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.